One rubric. And you need to grade them as a group. Okay? Number one, score. That's it. All right, any other group one rubrics that need to be collected at this point? Group one rubrics? Group one. Any others? Group one? Are we ready? All right, so please put a 2 at the top of the next rubric, please. Just let them let Bria know when you're ready. Ms. Johnson, where's she go? Is this still recording? Yeah. Okay. All right, so we need mouths closed.
What do you see when you look at this image? Do you just see an abstract image? Or just a bunch of circles? Or a target? Well, I see a representation of our world. There are 196 countries in the world today, and 50 of those countries are categorized as least developing countries. And 4 of those countries that are classified as LDCs are predicted to graduate from that list by 2017. So after doing research, we concluded that data is neither white or black, but gray, because many of the components to data doesn't reveal the conditions of the actual countries that are on the LDC list or its people.
I think it's interesting that people believe that data can define who someone is, their being, essence, if you will, their abilities, and their potential in life. Thomas Stoppard, an English playwright, once said, "I believe that the history of our civilization is actually an attempt to codify, classify, and categorize human aspects of human nature that hardly lend themselves to that process." And I must say it's true, as we did this research. As an example of this, we will be looking at Vanuatu, a country that is one of the determined to graduate from the least developing countries list created by the United Nations.
This is the flag of Vanuatu. The NEAT Vanuatu adopted it on February 18th, discovered in 1774 by a British captain, and it was colonized by both France and Britain. The two most urbanized areas are Port Vila, the capital, and Luganville, because they're the main tourist attraction sites when researching the country.
So when I first saw a brochure of Vanuatu, I saw the beautiful resorts they had to offer tourists. And however, as we started to research Vanuatu, we've discovered there was a hidden culture behind all the tourist attractions. So even though tourism helps Vanuatu's economy, it tears its culture. So we came up with like different questions like, where's the profit going to? Is it going to the people who are sacrificing their land for these resorts? Is it going to the people who are still living in huts and shacks and that are isolated for urbanization? Or is it still going to the French and British? And according to the Happy Place Index, Vanuatu is voted the most happiest place on earth. But is it from the tourists or the natives' perspective?
When I first came to the U.S., I didn't know English, and it was hard to adjust to the new culture. And over the course of my life, I've been learning English. I've been learning like common American code. I've been receiving like advanced education. And the downside of this is that I can't speak Yoruba anymore, and that's my native language. I mean, I can understand it, but to a small extent. And not knowing Yoruba inhibits my ability to practice my religion as effective as I want to. And the good thing about all of this is that I'm acquiring all the tools I need to live a happy and successful life. Have you ever been hungry before? And it feels good to eat, right? Have you ever been so hungry that you ate way more than you should have, and you didn't care about how much calories you would have to burn after?
Yeah.
I know someone here enjoyed the Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we did.
I remember when I felt hunger when I couldn't afford to eat regular price lunch. Well, people in Vanuatu don't have that relief because they experience this more often than we do. Data plays a major role in helping us make judgments and drawing conclusions. According to the World Bank, their GNI is at $3,090, and this may seem like a small amount to make, but according to the UN, they passed the standard threshold for GNI. Yeah, since they passed the standard threshold for GNI, they're considered a country without the need for economic aid. And well, GNI, well, in case you guys didn't know, GNI is the sum of a country's gross domestic product plus the net income they receive overseas. They also passed the Economic Vulnerability Index, and the Economic Vulnerability Index measures the structural vulnerability of countries by taking into account population size, merchandise export concentration, homelessness owing to natural disasters, and instability of exports of goods and services, along with other areas.
And on this graph, like it just compares this gray line is Vanuatu. This is Timor-Leste, however you pronounce it. One of our groups is doing that country. And they're above Vanuatu in terms of GNI. And this is the one country that's below, according to the UN. This is their GNI. And this is all specific states together, like their average. This red line there. Okay. There are a lot of gaps in Vanuatu's history. There can be many things that can be credited to. They were discovered in 1774, but no other records are found of them until 1906. I think that has a lot to do with their tribal culture I know historically in tribal cultures, history is passed down through word of mouth. There are no written records of it. And because of that, the only records available to us are from their French and British perspective. And it kind of erases the truth of the people because that's not their perspective about what happened. It's the French and the British who colonized it and had some type of gain. But basically, it's really important to tell your own story and not let anybody else tell it for you. In least developing countries and countries that are colonized by other nations and receiving economical help and all these things, erasure is commonplace. And as they colonize there, and the people of the country become more and more accustomed to the people who are colonizing them, their thoughts and opinions gradually begin to change. And then a culture is suddenly erased off the earth, and nobody would probably know. Like, a lot of people don't even know where Vanuatu is. It's Oceania, by the way, by Australia. So, have any of you ever felt silenced? Like, I guess you don't want to speak? Okay. I know for me personally, I felt silenced before. Previously, I went to an engineering conference at a university, and it was breakfast, and there were about 200 attendees, and the table seated 8. And I remember feeling so alone because I was sitting at a table with 7 other girls that knew each other, and they were Caucasian from some other part of Maryland. And every time I said something, they basically ignored me, or they just kind of gave me like this dirty look, like, why are you talking? And I was just like, oh, true. So I just stay quiet. But they took everything I said in like a negative way. Like, I don't know why, but they just twisted everything around, and it was kind of hard to fix the issue after that started. So I just didn't say anything after that. So, yeah.
So initially we assumed that Vanuatu was an uncivilized and poor country since it's like isolated in the middle of the ocean anyway. But after a while, we kind of concluded that Vanuatu is pretty developed for where it is and what it is. Even though its GNI is about $3,000, they make it work. And we also took into account that maybe in order to live a stable life, $3,000 a year is pretty okay. Like, it helps give them everything they need. So Vanuatu, it does include a stable government, their own way of living. So we also took into account with the World Bank how it compares LDCs to like well-developed countries, which isn't fair. So like America and Vanuatu, you can't do that. And that's why at first I felt as though, oh, it's really poor because in $3,000 in America, you cannot survive even a month. So it just proved that data was biased. Oh, I'm sorry. So it goes back to what Esmeralda said about data and how it don't make it define you. Well, since we're seniors this year, we're applying for colleges and they want our SAT scores and GPA. And even though both those pieces of data give a college like a good idea of who we are and our work ethic, it gives a good idea of our work ethic, but not who we are. Because we have a lot to give back to a college and just to make our mark. But those 2 pieces of data can make or break us.
Okay. When looking at data, we must question whether it's reliable or not. We must consider the people of Vanuatu's perspective of their country and not only the sources provided to us, which is data from the UN or the World Bank. Everyone has different standards, so we shouldn't focus on one standard to reflect the entirety of data because it can be interpreted in different ways.
I know.
In my IB Math Studies course, we did internal assessments, and I did mine on a survey. Well, I surveyed people on sleep deprivation, and the data was biased because all the participants resided in North America, and as a result, I couldn't make any general conclusions. And I used to think that mathematical data was absolute, and there was like no arguing it, but I've discovered that this way of thinking is wrong.
Okay. Now that I've done research into data, I can recognize it as a 2-edged sword. It can be interpreted to mean different things depending on the value of the audience who is interpreting the data. Before, I thought data was just like meant to be seen and not argued. I naively wanted to believe that I didn't have to do my own research and I could just read what I was told and just run with that. Now I understand that there are biases in data that can easily twist my mind and knots if I'm not careful with the sources. For example, in English class, we've been talking about metamorphosis, well, previously, talking about metamorphosis and how it was originally intended to be a humorous novel, but it actually came across as a sad novel for many of my classmates. And we were talking about authorial intention, whether it should be ignored, acknowledged, or exalted. And I just thought it was really interesting, like different people's perspectives on it, because whether the author's intention matters or not, you have your own view of the story, and it's probably not going to change even if you knew the authorial intention.
So at first, I used to think that any country whose GNI was less than $50,000, which is America's GNI, that it was a poor country. And like I said previously, that Vanuatu's GNI is about $3,000. But at the same time, we took into account that maybe $3,000 is enough to live a stable life in Vanuatu. So it just reminded me of like in my language class, I take Spanish, how Ms. Robertson teaches us about different beliefs and traditions that are being practiced in the different Spanish-speaking countries, so we won't be ignorant about the culture and the language that we're being taught. So it just goes to show like it's good to have more research and don't always depend on data because there are limitations to it. Good.
No. It looked like that was on here.
Is it me? Somebody on You pick them up? Yeah, yeah. Oh, you guys.
Oh, I thought everybody had
Yeah. Any more rubrics for group 2? Is that it? Any more for group 2?
Oh, yeah, hurry up.
For your group 2?
Yeah.
Anybody else for group 2? All right, if not, then we need mouths closed so that we can move on.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joycelyn Jansen. This is my final word, and Temi Tope. So the country we researched on poverty was Timor-Leste, and Leste in Portuguese means east, and East Timor was colonized by the Portuguese and Indonesia, and once they gained their independence from Portugal, in 1974. A month later, they were invaded by Indonesia, and Indonesia occupied the country for 24 years after. And because of the riots and the revolts that were going on in the country, the UN had to intervene and send troops, and they later gained their independence in 2002. So they're quite young, 13 years old, younger than most of us here. But Timor-Leste is very fertile. It has gold, it has copper, it has oil on their shores, and a lot of natural resources in its mountainous terrain. And a lot of those resources were being extracted from their country and taken to the colonizing nation like Portugal. And it didn't cultivate Timor-Leste's economy. It didn't help them and benefit them in any way, making them poor and why we're here today. But Timor-Leste, for a young country, has done really well compared to other countries that have gotten their independence in like years past, such as Malawi. They got their independence in 1974. And because of Timor-Leste's fertility and the fact that they're really good on their petroleum industry is so good, they develop quite well. They still have a long way to go in terms of education and employment because they really have a high unemployment rate, and they also have a lot of natural disasters and don't have plans in place to prevent these.
So I recently read about a young man named William from who had given a TED talk about how he created his own windmill out of scrap that he found in the village in order to produce electricity for the village. So as you can see, he created a windmill from a bicycle frame, a tractor fan, sticks, PVC pipes, motorcycle engine, and some other stuff that he found in the village. So this is a closer look at the main part of his windmill. So you can see the bicycle frame and the tractor fan. This is Kumpam himself. So in his TED talk, he talks about two problems that are present in many underdeveloped countries, such as famine and illiteracy. Throughout most of his life, him and his family lived off of 1 meal a day. It was called sima, which is a staple food made out of corn. Sima is similar to stuff like fufu, eva, and all the other stuff, if you know about it. So imagine having a dry food like fufu and stuff 1 time a day, every day, for years. That's how they live, basically. So most of us, we cannot make it through first period without eating breakfast, but he not only survived like this, he flourished and he created a better life for himself and his village. So I hope I was able to create a picture of the struggle that many people in undeveloped countries are faced with. Because now I want to present you guys with data, which always tells the truth. So this is a graph that shows the GNI per capita of both Timor-Leste, which is in the green, and Malawi in the purple. But as you can see, Timor-Leste currently has a GNI per capita of $3,120. GNI per capita is the amount of money that the average person in that country makes per year. So basically, the average Timor-Lestean lives off about $8.50 a day, while the average Malawian makes $20 per year and lives off about 68 cents per day. Wow. So Timor-Leste also they gained their independence in 2002, so they're fairly young. They're younger than most of the year. While Malawi is quite old, they gained their independence in 1954, so they're older than most of the year. And as you can also see, there are fluctuations in their graph. This is because they are new and the economy is so unstable. So based on this, I know I've led you to believe that GNI per capita, like all other quantitative data, is misleading or making value different. So allow me to show you how. So based on this, I know that I have showed you that Timor-Leste is richer than Malawi both. I'm going to show you the other day. Otherwise. So this is the GDP. GDP is the national income of the country as a whole. So as you can see, Malawi in the purple has a GDP of about over 4 billion, which is much bigger than Timor-Leste GDP, which is about $1.5 billion. So based on this, how is it possible that Malawi can have a greater national income than Timor-Leste, but Timor-Leste has a greater GNI per capita than Malawi? I'll tell you how. This is possible because GNI per capita is found by taking the national income and dividing it by the population of the country. And since Malawi has a greater population than Timor-Leste, that's the reason why their GNI per capita is not lower, and which is thus the reason why GNI per capita is a better indicator of poverty than GDP. But GNI per capita also has limitations because GNI per capita does not take into account inequalities in income distribution. So let's take, for example, a country that their richest 1% makes about 99%, makes about 99% of the country's national income, while the other 99% living in extreme poverty and only comprises of the other 1% of the national income. GNI per capita will not show this. So I believe that the best way to show a country's progress of poverty is through the progress of poverty index, which is this. So this is an example of a progress of poverty index survey. So this is one question from the progress of poverty index survey, and I believe this is the most important question. So as you can see, there are numbers for each answer choice from the variance. So the lower the number, when the survey is over, the lower the number is, that's the more impoverished the country is. The higher the number is, the less impoverished the country is. And I chose this question as the most significant because I believe that this question can, as a whole, portray the family's level of poverty. Because education is the best way to get out of poverty. So that's why I chose this question. And also, PPI also has limitations because it's a survey style type question. People can lie on it.
So education in Timor-Leste. Timor-Leste gained independence on May 20th, 2002, which led to a massive destruction of the learning schools and other places of learning. This also led to a major shortage of teachers, which ultimately led to a limitation of their access to education. This was among many of their other issues. The impoverished in Timor-Leste lived in traditional homes, as you can see in this image provided. Sorry, it's not very clear. This kind of homes led to problems with running water and electricity. So think about this. 85% of Timor-Leste's entire population relies on subsistence-based agriculture. So what they fished, what they made in their backyard, is basically what they brought to the table and what they ate. Another issue that I found was domestic abuse. In an article provided by The Guardian, a citizen of Timor-Leste provided their brief description of their experience with domestic abuse. The medical issues were also just as present. So an average Timor-Leste citizen lives up to the age 67. By show of hands, how many of us have extended family, parents, or grandparents who have exceeded the age of 67? Okay, so what I need to say about this is that 67 is not a very old age. In countries like this who have such a short lifespan cannot fend for themselves. They are not self-sufficient. And this inability is wiping away the population of Timor-Leste. Financial losses and deaths are a result of natural disasters such as earthquakes and tsunamis, and diseases like malaria, plagues, and HIV/AIDS have also been taking out the people of Timor-Leste one by one. These diseases do not come from one place. Some of them are vector-borne, food-borne, water-borne, animal contact like rabies. But fortunately, a country like this is definitely not too proud to live. They are organized and they are not completely helpless. In fact, medical and healthcare is a fundamental right in Timor-Leste. Their government has initiated a national sector supply plan for the years 2011 all the way up to 2030. This is a promise and commitment to the Millennium Goals for provisions of health. United Nations also played a role in Timor-Leste. Their development goal number 6 suggests ideas to use to combat and fight against diseases like HIV/AIDS. The ultimate goal of their healthcare plan is to promote a healthy lifestyle for all Timor-Leste people. So I believe that with education, they'll be able to build a solid foundation to build a ladder to climb out of the hole that Indonesia and Portugal have dug out for them. The damage in Indonesia has basically set them very, very, very back. So now they have to work much harder using education to get out of it. Indonesia's goal is to become the dominant country in Southeast Asia and Asia. They would like to be a controlling big brother and have complete access to their territory and natural resources. So why do I think US would be a better supporter, a better partner for Timor-Leste? Well, actually, they've been partnering with Timor-Leste since 1999. I think that's when most of this was. So, and they have donated billions, not millions, but billions of dollars to programs such as the International Republican Institute and the International Democratic Institute. They used this money to develop political framework, political parties, citizen participation, and local governance. So bringing it back home to Parkdale High School. In my IB history class, we have learned about impoverished nations and how most impoverished nations usually face starvation, and hungry people are angry people. I'm one of them. So, and these angry people have led the revolutions and revolts that have led to their independence in 2002. Countries and Indonesia and Portugal's control has led to their poor standard of living that ultimately led to poverty and then their independence. That gives you a better image. This also occurred in 1910 in Mexico during the Mexican Revolution. Although a lot of blood was shed and they are an independent country today, the problems of the impoverished remain. So they need education. And as Nelson Mandela once said, education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. And with education, they'll be able to climb up the ladder that they're building themselves slowly but surely.
Well, after researching about Timor-Leste, I've come to many realizations. I realized that when you research poverty and people of another country, you tend to label them as one thing. When I was researching about Timor-Leste, it was on the least countries development list, and I thought immediately they're poor, and that they're just going to be poor people, and that they have nothing but poorness. They're nothing but poor. But anyway, I realized when I was researching about their culture and their way of life, I realized there's so much more. They're persevering. They can endure two colonizers. They can endure all this time where they were trying to get their independence and persevere. And I think that they're much more than what I labeled them to be as initially. They have a culture and the way that they dance and the rhythm of their feet. They're much more than what I claimed them to be. And I also think that when we look at poverty, you have to look at it from another lens. Poverty is relative to whatever environment or culture you're in. It's not necessarily one status quo for poverty. And I realized that poverty is multidimensional. Temi mentioned earlier that the indexes to measure poverty may be biased, and the data that we see from the World Bank or the UN may give us a false perception of what's really going on, but that might not necessarily be the case. You have to take into account many things. And I initially defined poverty as lacking monetarily, preventing one from getting their basic needs like food and water. But I realized that there's much more to poverty. There's social poverty, there's legal poverty, there's political poverty, and there's economic poverty. So those are things that I learned to take into account. So, you can go to the next slide. Why is this relevant? Who cares about Timor-Leste, a little island in Oceania? Timor-Leste, everything we do actually, the US is a superpower culturally, economically, and military-wise. It gets back to our lab. Their economy affects the global economy. Our tax money is going to pay for their foreign aid. So a lot of things that happen there still end up on our labs. The US is a UN permanent member. So all the issues, all the revolts, all the revolutions, all the coup d'etats that rise in Timor-Leste, they end up on the UN's lap, and it's always going to come back to us. So I think as global citizens and as IB students and competent individuals, we need to stand up and fight for other people's rights. And I'm not saying that we have to change the world and end poverty now, but the small steps we do can make a really big difference. And one thing I learned from my father, he always used to tell me in the car when we were driving, education, education, education. Education is the first thing to getting out of poverty. Educating ourselves within our communities, educating ourselves on what's going on around the world is important. And like Ms. Swift always says, and it's a quote from IB, think globally and act locally. So that's what we must do to end poverty. And we must donate our time, we must volunteer, we must get involved. If you want, you can take legislative action and work hard and grind, but at the end of the day, the small steps we do end poverty, and there's a goal that we should end extreme poverty poverty, and 1.2 billion people living in extreme poverty around the world. I know for myself, I'm living a luxurious life compared to those people living in extreme poverty. So let's take a stand and be great citizens and help those in need.
Three, make sure you put the three on the top of the rubric, please.
Number three, everybody. Any others? Group three rubrics. Anybody else? Group three rubrics. All right, we need mouths closed. Just let Bria know when you're ready.
History is the version of past events that people have decided to agree upon. The man that said this was none other than Napoleon Bonaparte. He was a general in the French military and ruled that empire for decades. He was controlling one of the largest empires in the world. This is all that the French Empire had between 1919 and 1939. Our country, Niger, is one of those countries that was a colony of France. Another colony of France was Tunisia, my father's country. Tunisia got its independence in 1956. Niger got its independence in 1960. Since their independence, Tunisia has maintained a healthy relationship with France and a strong economic partnership. Niger has not fared as well. Niger only now banned slavery in 2003. While we have been alive, there have been people enslaved in Niger lawfully and legally. Niger is also one of the top 10 poorest nations in the world. Their quality of life is not something that we would want to be living with. It is not something that any or most Africans in the country, in the continent, would want to be living in. It's one of the lowest, and they are not doing very well. This is Niamey. This is their capital. We all are, I'm assuming we've all been to DC. We've seen what DC has, and that's our capital. It's got the monuments, and it's got the paved roads, and this is their capital. This is
This is their most developed country, developed city. This is what everyone sees when they first get to Niger. This is where their airport is, the only airport in Niger. Niger has a prime minister and a president. They share equal power. They also have the General Assembly that elects the president by unanimous vote, and the president then elects a prime minister whom the General Assembly has to agree on. There are 9 political parties, and because of how their government is set up, where the General Assembly picks the president picks the prime minister, only one party rules at the time. This is very different from what we have. We have a Democratic president and a Republican Senate, and well, they ought to be working together, but we know that's not always the case. Here, it is one that rules all. So for the rest of the nation that is in the 8 other parties, they are not getting what their party perhaps wants or desires when their government is ruled by only one. Their current president is Mamadou Issoufou, and Prime Minister is Bridi Rafini. These men have just replaced a dictator in 2011. The dictator had changed the constitution so that he could stay longer and so that he would have absolute and total control. They have 7 neighbors: Algeria, Libya, Chad, Nigeria, Benin, Burkina Faso, and Mali. These countries are better off than Niger is in terms of how much money they have and where they stand in the poverty index. But these other nations have issues of their own. Al-Qaeda is located in Mali and are causing issues in Niger. There is violence in southern Libya that is spilling into Niger. Nigeria has a terrorist organization known as Boko Haram, which I'm sure you've heard of or should know of. They are also causing issues in Niger because its majority population is Muslim, and that's pretty much whom the Boko Haram group is attacking. Mali is also having its own revolutions in the civil war, and refugees are fleeing to Niger. Mali is currently above Niger in terms of poverty, and when people from a less poor nation are seeking refuge in one of the poorest, I can only tell you how bad it is in Mali. All of this is causing Niger to stay as number four poorest in the world, preventing Niger from industrializing, from getting past this. Given what they've had to go through, and given their history that I presented you, it can be obvious why Niger is still where it is, where it hasn't progressed since its independence. Not every country flourishes after they get independence from their colony, but Niger has been exceptionally poor. History has proven that not all nations that gain independence from their colonizers do well, but history is also something that can be contested. In our Theory of Knowledge book, we learned how sense perception is variable, actively selective, and interpretive. A person's cognitive biases can affect how well they remember an event or history. This affects how people remember Niger when it was a colony of France, how it was after, and it affects how we look at it now. America is not Niger, and Niger is not America. We are very different geographically, religiously, economically. It would be absurd to compare them. However, here we are, and we have compared them. We look at their ranking in their national GDI, and it's $300-some a year. This is exceptionally low for Africa, and it's extremely low when we look at it from our American point of view. Napoleon must have been onto something. Perhaps we have well agreed on a particular history we are going to present, and then we are going to teach, but then we'll lose part of the truth. Niger might be one of the poorest countries or least developed nation, but how did they get there? Was it on their own? I would say it wasn't, because of their history. They did not have it up to them the entire time. They had France ruling them, and then they had France not ruling them. and not everyone does well, and this is one of the instances, and I'm gonna say that's why they are where they are. Given the facts and data we've been presented, us, the outsiders, the successful, the lucky, is this enough to give us the big picture? This is the part of the exam where you circle letter E, not enough information. I can't answer the question right now, but we have some other information if that's what you need.
So you guys know how New York State is, right? How small it is. And okay, imagine half of New York, like the whole of New York City, is basically Niger, and half of it, compared to Niger, is how good percentage of poor people are. In Niger, half of the people in Niger are poor. It's like 49%, but that's mostly half of them are like poor. And compared that to compared to the United States, that's like one of the smallest states in the country. So you can see how poor the country is. And also moving on to healthcare. So in this photo, this is basically like, it looks like a primary school where children come for learning, but they use it as a healthcare center where they can get immunization. And compared to like, I have a personal experience about this. So I remember when I was like in fourth grade, I believe it was fourth grade, like I came to school one day and they told us that, oh, the World Health Organization people are coming to school to immunize us. I was like, what? Since when did they start doing that? I was like really surprised. It's like, it has never happened before. Like the last one happened was like when I was in nursery school, was it first grade. So it was really surprising. You can see how bad like how poor the healthcare system is for children to be immunized once when they were born, and like then many years later they might not even be immunized again. And like that's like very different compared to when it comes to the United States of America. Oh, okay, when you're born, they give you shots. Then each year, like twice in each year, you get shots for the flu shots. There's that, right? So yeah, so looking at that, compare them to us, that's like really poor. So moving along, in Niger, primary school is like mandatory for the ages 7 to 15. So basically, when you're like 16, you don't have to go to school, which is ridiculous because I know most of you guys in here are like 16 or above, and you're like still mandatory to go to school, which is quite ridiculous because if you look at the literacy rate in Niger, only 19.1 of them actually are literate. Only 19.1 compared to like what the 4 billion. That's like insane. Like it's crazy. So like yeah. So this is a picture. So let me give you this equation. Okay. I know most of you in here are like really math students. So I need like some people to answer this question. So 4 times 1 million equals 4 million, right? 4 million times 7 equals 28 million. That's 28 million. Let me tell you what those numbers mean. So you see 4 women in this picture, and each 4 women represent 1 million females that are able to give birth in Niger. And each of them are expected to have 7 babies, at average of 7 babies. So imagine all of those 4 million times Niger, 28 million. Given the circumstances the country is in, there are 28 million more people added into that kind of situation. Exactly. You know, so that's like more, like you're adding more to like the little they have. They have to split it more, and it's like ridiculous. Yeah, it's given the circumstances of the country. So that's quite ridiculous in that case. So looking at how the poverty was like other groups mentioned, I know you heard the multi-dimensional poverty index and the dimension the other one, which was the progress out of poverty index. So I looked at both of them, and like the other groups mentioned, they said that the MPI is better, like the PPI is better to use. But I believe that since I'm a math person, I chose that the MPI should be used to look at the country specifically, because if you look, is given the circumstances of the country, they're already poor, and the PPI is like a survey, the papers that are being printed out with like really expensive. And if you're printing out a whole bunch of papers to give to each person in the family, that's gonna cost a lot of money. And given the situation in the country, then they don't have that much money to be printing all that papers to pass out to each community. So I believe that the PPI, which is like basically they put it on the internet, that each time you come, they fill out the survey online, which is better. I mean, the internet is not that good there, but at least you can. It's less time consuming, and it also saves money. It saves money for them to like use the money for something else instead of printing out a whole bunch of papers to give out surveys. So yeah, I believe that's less time consuming, and most of our data, like data we got from World Bank and the CIA. Okay, all the data are like from 2004, 2011. So none of the data are like current, or mostly can be inaccurate. Like in math, we talk about the valid bar, like the error bars. Like error bars are in those error bars do exist in those numbers we have. So most of the numbers can be less than, it can be less than the 28 million babies are being born, or more than 28 million babies are being born. So basically, the data can be inaccurate. There's no 100%.
Okay, so as humans, we subconsciously and consciously make judgments about everything we hear, see, and observe. The difference between someone who makes valid and healthy judgments and someone who doesn't is that they take everything into consideration. So answering the essential question, what role does data really play in making value judgments? We believe that data has a limited role when making value judgments. Facts and numbers are finite, but the extent that human circumstances encompass, whether big or small, have scopes that are much greater than numbers. Data and statistics don't suffice. We can't use simply those. We must look at every aspect of the story, of the picture, of a person's life. Otherwise, we are prone to making uninformed, misinterpreted, and ignorant judgments. Facts don't tell you how someone feels, how they live, or the conditions that they are living in. So going back to what Nadia and Victoria said, their initial value judgments, they were similar to mine. I judged Niger by looking at them at face value. I thought that they were a poor country and they didn't have much more than much hope for them. And I didn't consider what was most important, which was their experiences and the value of those experiences. Niger's poor isn't our poor. Niger's hungry isn't our hungry. Niger's rich isn't our rich. We can't assess countries at face value only because they are so uniquely different from us. First, before making value judgments, we must step into their shoes. In TOK class, we're encouraged to explore various perspectives. And through our presentation, we have learned to differentiate between our first world thinking and the thinking of the Nigerians, as well as the thinking and the views of the sources that we compiled our research from. So we acknowledge these new perspectives and appreciate them all. So why should we care about what's going on in Niger? How does this affect us? Niger deserves our help because they're humans. They're our fellow humans. They're representative of most of the world's population, which 1.3 billion people in the world are in extreme poverty. Most of our world is impoverished, and we can't and must not sit back and watch. Knowledge leads to awareness, which leads to action and commitment. Desmond Tutu once said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse, and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. We must look at this as Niger's issue, but as our issue. Not only does this impact Niger individually, in its communities, and as a country, but more importantly, it extends to us collectively, globally.
So make sure you put a 4 at the top of the rubric.
Yes.
Like someone.
Benj, can you pick up the rubric 2.4, please?
Juniors, the bell's gonna ring in 7 minutes, but stay put. Fine. Are y'all done?
Yeah. It's the last one. Anybody else? 4. Pardon? All right, so we need mouths closed, and you let Bria know when you're ready. Do you all have the clicker?
Yeah.
Okay.
We think sometimes that poverty is only being hungry, naked, and homeless.
The poverty of being unwanted, unloved, and uncared for is the greatest poverty.
We must start in our own homes to remedy this kind of poverty. We tend to view poverty through one lens, but we never take the time to evaluate the situation beyond a superficial perspective. Haiti, a country in which we're looking at and which our teachers, how will we get a shake out of Haiti?
January 12th, 2010. For some, that was just a normal day, but not for the citizens of Haiti. A day of devastation, a day of tragedy. A day when a 7.0 magnitude earthquake struck the country, leaving more than 160,000 individuals dead and 1.5 million homeless. When we tend to take a look at the country of Haiti, we think of suffering. And the past is definitely going to prove it. During the late 1400s, slavery was a major culprit of the plummeting economy and the limit of expansion of the country. And of course, there was French colonialism.
And that also limited the very independence of the country as well. The Haitian government has worked for years trying to stabilize the political and social foundation of the country. But imagine having to work out your country's independence while still trying to prevent your innocent people from undergoing the pressures of human and sex trafficking. Recently was looking at an article that was written in December 2012, approximately 2 years after the earthquake had taken place. The article was titled "Haiti Lags Even After Billions of Aid." I personally felt that the article really captured how far along Haiti has come in order to bounce back from the massive earthquake. But in that case, that was not so positive, because the article proved that even after the millions of donations and amounts of aid given to the country, they're still pretty much deep in the hole. And we took the time to actually cultivate an image and as you can see, it is a 3-paneled image, and we have given it some text and wrote a caption. The first image is saying Haiti pre-quake, the second image says Haiti post-quake, and then the third image says Haiti reconstruction. We cultivated this image because we wanted to really show how there hasn't been much change in the country during the event of the 2010 earthquake. As you can see, the country is pretty much in bad shape, even before the earthquake even occurred. And the second image, it seems that has worsened. And in the third image, the process of still reconstructing is still going on. When will change come? During my time of looking into history, I really received the opportunity to understand its purpose in this entire project. I was specifically able to make a connection to our IB history class and the different perspectives of the past we are presented with. And I desperately wanted to know, what makes one more valuable than the other? Is the actual story better than the observed over a period of time? Historians have played a major role in how we have viewed history over the years. When we were particularly looking at World War II and the significant roles that were played, we were presented with numerous amounts of documents that presented many ideas and different sides and biases. And I noticed that just like the research of Haiti, we are presented with different pieces of data that gives us many different perspectives on how we should view the country.
Haiti is ranked 168 out of 180. They're at the bottom of the food chain, or bottom of the chain. So many people will state that they're not getting better, but they will get entirely worse. From the World Bank website, the data states the life expectancy for Haiti, which is in red, is 63. And being that the carbon dioxide emission is 0.2%, it states that they are an agricultural environment in which it limits the amount of resources that they are able to get. So because of that, kids are unable to go to school because parents, they pull them out of education to come help them work in the farms because they need money. They need money now. So instead of them going to the education, they have to come get out of the education and go to the farms. Have you ever been hungry before? Similar to the process of how the government chooses whether you get free or reduced lunch is a similar process in which how Haiti was chosen to be 168 out of 187 in this world, even today. From a mathematical standpoint, poverty is viewed in a quantitative format. So many people or places are viewed based upon numbers. The progress out of poverty index is also states a qualitative format and a quantitative format because it's a measurement tool used for organizations and management to determine those who are impoverished and which organizations are able to help them. They ask 10 simple questions to determine whether one is impoverished or not. So one question that I took, which was very significant from the PPI, stated, where does the household reside? And 15 points stated that they reside in Port-au-Prince, which is the poorest city in Haiti. So many people, many impoverished people go there. So the fact that PPI was used for Port-au-Prince stated that Port-au-Prince has many impoverished people. PPI, stated previously, is a country specific, in which the Grameen Foundation offers this tool to determine who falls under $1.25 a day. And Haiti, being 55.5% impoverished, over half of Haiti is impoverished. So they came up with this using a communal pool in which is used for people to come together, mathematicians specifically, in which I got from my theory of knowledge class, the mathematics section of the book, stated that the communal pool is used in which mathematicians come together to determine how much percent of those are poor based upon the poverty line, in which determine how Haiti is Haitians are 55.5% impoverished.
Haiti is on the brink of a humanitarian crisis. Haiti is the true definition of Mother Teresa's great quote, by being unwanted by the Dominican Republic, uncared for by the government, and loved by the world. Unwanted by the Dominican Republic in the sense that many Haitians are being deported from the DR, as you all might have heard of the national news. Historians say that the cause of this mass deportation is because of xenophobia, which is the fear of people from other countries. I believe this is a lie. That sounds absurd. The real reason of this mass deportation is racism. Again, in a situation where just by somebody being darker will cause you to do such as much as remove them from the country. Uncared for by the government. Repeatedly, Haiti has had the horrible experience of having terrible political leaders. Recently, Port-au-Prince, their president, Michael Martelly, was caught in scandal of making sure he and his corrupt friends stayed in power. By making sure that when they were caught in their corrupt activities, they were moved from jail as quickly as possible. Also, Mr. Martelly has been caught in another scandal by using a good amount of Haiti's funding to assist him in his strange musical endeavors. Unloved by the world, Haiti is in a deep hole that it needs help to get out from. Haiti doesn't need only money, it needs a better government. It needs to be loved like the Dominican Republic. It needs interference from other countries. Not only is Haiti still attempting to recover from the earthquake of 2010, but because of the earthquake, plus the funding already given to Haiti, more than $9 billion will have to be paid back by 2016. You as I was, is probably wondering why you should prepare. Let me put it into perspective. No one likes to be hungry. As we all come back from Thanksgiving, we see some of the value of what food actually means to us. I assume you can go to the fridge one day and not see something you like in the fridge, but a few hours later it's there. And I would soon go into that same fridge every day and not see anything there. I would like to inform you that we have little by little helped Haiti. With more, we can see more pictures like this.
Now we would like to refer back to the personal question that was asked of us about the split. How will we get a shake out of Haiti? And we must admit, we initially thought that isn't the research that we've done all the shake we could get? But according to a fellow TED talker by the name of Susan Entlinger, the data that we are presented with in society is now in our power. We manipulate how we project it to others and how relevant it is in their lives. Simply, if we make it important to us, then we can make it important to others. but not anyone could lie. The data presented clearly gives us a cause to, but we choose to go beyond that superficial perspective. We chose not to view Haiti as just a LCD or a least developed country, but a country that matters, a country of importance, one of value. So ultimately, from our experience, we have been able to view the matter of Haitian poverty through history, mathematics. We choose to view with that information. It is now up to us. Thank you.
All right, make sure you put the 5 on the top of the rubric, please. Ms. Johnson.